On this special episode of Trove Talk, we're going to go through the process of creating a lair or dungeon. So the first step is to create the geometry of the dungeon, like your rooms and the corridors and everything in your voxel editor of choice. Once you have that ready, then you will be accessing the Metaforge. Once you're happy with the structure of your dungeon, you can then populate it with traps, enemies, quest areas, jumping puzzles, and anything that you can think of that will make it a fun experience to play in. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and create our dungeon structure in our voxel editor of choice. And as you can see, it's really easy. I can do it, so you can probably do it too. And if your dungeon is accepted by the Trove dev team after submission, it will be playable by everyone in the Trove world. Once you finish your QB files, it's time to enter the Metaforge. To access the Metaforge, the command is /mf followed by enter, and that will take you to the place where the magic happens. The Metaforge is where you turn your block of voxels into an actual playable environment. As you can see in the top right, I've already created my QE files. This is the batch file that you will need to run them through to create the blueprints that you'll be working with. So let's go ahead and do that. All you need to do is just drag your QB files onto the batch file, and it will do all the work for you. It will create all the blueprints that you will need. Blueprint format is the only format that the Metaforge will read, so you really must do this step. Once you have all your blueprint files, it's time to make the .dungeon file. You will want to name it in a way that is representative of your dungeon. As you can see, we've called this one Barrow Mound because that's what it is. And in the .dungeon file, you will want to list all of the blueprints you are going to be using. In this case, I'm using the entrance blueprint, 3 different venture area blueprints, and the boss area blueprint. It helps to list all the blueprints in the file in order so you can have the structure of the dungeon clear in your mind. So here we have one entrance because our dungeon is going to be composed of one entrance, one adventure area, and the boss area. As you can see, the entrance is just has the blueprint name and the quantity, but then the adventure area actually has a variable called weight. So the weight variable controls the likelihood that the game will use that particular blueprint in the dungeon when generating it. All of the adventure areas have a 0.33 chance of being used, meaning that they have an equal chance. And then here is the boss template. We only have one piece of geometry, so we're only going to ever use the one piece. And now I'm going to drag it into the Metaforge and verify that it works. So here the Metaforge has generated my dungeon correctly. Something that will be very useful to you when placing things in the Metaforge is FreeCam. FreeCam mode can be accessed by hitting the F9 key. So it's usually very useful to do a run through as a player, looking at places where the player's camera is going to go. Like for example, here I'm going through this area, and I notice in the top left corner of the screen, there's some bleed through of the snow blocks that I placed up outside into the inside of the dungeon. So I'll want to go back and fix that so that there's no snow on the inside of the entrance area. Once you've completed a walkthrough of your room and verified what needs fixing and they're happy, now is the time to populate your hotbar with the tools that you're going to be using to actually turn your geometry into a playable space. So for example, here's the GM Quest teleporter. This is the teleporter that appears once you complete the dungeon. You're also going to want the red plug. The red plug is what connects the dungeon to the world, and it is of vital importance that you place it correctly. If the red plug is placed incorrectly, chances are your dungeon will not generate, and it is going to be really frustrating to troubleshoot. Then once we have the red plug, we'll also want to take the first set of plug-in sockets that we are going to use to connect our entrance to the rest of the rooms of the dungeon. once we have that, we're gonna go ahead and place our GM Quest teleporter, the exit one. One of the nice things about the GM Quest teleporter is that it will place the player wherever you want them. So as a little added bonus for completing the dungeon, you can put it somewhere where they're going to be able to get a nice view of the outer layer of the dungeon and the surrounding environment. So here we're going to go ahead and put it somewhere a little elevated, but not at the very top. Once you've placed the exit teleporter, you'll want to load in the boss area and place the matching teleporter that will lead the player to that area. So here we are, we've loaded in the blueprint for the boss room, and we're in free cam mode. And this is where the boss encounter or the ominous totem is going to be. So we place the teleporter somewhere nearby, but not in the way. And then since we're here, we're also going to place the boss quest locator. This will place the ominous totem, or will spawn the boss in this particular area. And now it's time to connect our rooms with plugs and sockets. So we're gonna go ahead and load the entrance again, and we're gonna select the red plug. The red plug is vital because it's where the dungeon connects to the world, and we're going to place it in the exact center or as close to it as possible. So the really smart thing to do is to place an off color, usually a bright red voxel, in that location where the red plug is going to be. If you don't do the smart thing, like me, then you have to figure a workaround, which is what I'm doing here. I'm actually using a number of blocks to calculate the exact center of my blueprint so I can place the red plug in the correct place. And then once you have the exact center, you will want to find the block and destroy it and place the red plug. And then once you've placed the red plug, you want to save your work, and then now is the time to add your blueprint to your .dungeon file and run and drag your .dungeon file into the Metaforge to make sure that it is working correctly. Before we do that though, we're going to go ahead and place the orange socket, which is where the next room in the sequence of this dungeon is going to plug into. So here we are. I usually find it useful to place it in the part of your blueprint that is going to connect to the next part. So in this case, the staircase that leads down to the first adventure area. And then we're going to load the next room in the sequence, which is going to be the first of our adventure areas. And then we're going to want to place the orange plug in the exact same physical location as the orange socket is in the previous room, so that when the game generates the dungeon, the orange plug and the orange socket are occupying the same physical space. So just like we did here, we're going to go ahead and repeat the process for all of our other adventure area variants. So here's another layout, and we're going to do the same. We're going to place another orange plug in the exact same place. This is where we add the adventure areas to the .dungeon file so that we can test that we've placed all the sockets correctly and everything is working. We want to list all of the blueprints that we're going to use and number them appropriately. So here we are placing all of our... Sorry, here we are copy pasting the first entry and then just editing the piece number and the blueprint. And then we're also going to want to add a weight value for each of them, as we saw earlier. So the piece number is important because we want to have them all listed in sequence. And here we're going to add the weight variable, which is going to be the same for all of them, so that the game has an equal chance of spawning each possible variant. So you're going to want to rename all of the blueprints in the listing to match the names of the blueprints for your rooms. So we have level 1, level 2, and level 3. And then once you've done this, you save, and you drag it into the Metaforge, and if you've done everything correctly, it will generate your dungeon. So here we're in free cam. We're gonna go take a look, make sure that the two rooms are connected correctly. So we go in through the thing, find the stairwell, go down, and it works. So once we've done the walkthrough and confirmed that the geometry works, we're going to want to drag the .dungeon file into the Metaforge a few more times, just to be sure that we test all the possible variants. Every time you drag the .dungeon file into the Metaforge, it's going to go through that process of randomly selecting from all of the possible iterations of your adventure area in this case. So we want to make sure we run that a few times to make sure that one specific variant of the adventure area doesn't have a problem. So once we've run it once we've run the .dungeon file through the Metaforge a few times to give it a chance to try all the possible iterations, we're gonna go ahead and place the yellow socket, which is where the adventure area is going to connect to the boss area. So we place the yellow socket, we save our work, we load in all of the other level variants, level 2 and level 3, and repeat the same process of placing the yellow socket and saving. Okay, so once we've placed the yellow socket in all of our adventure areas and saved the blueprints, we can load up the boss area blueprint, and connect it to the rest of the dungeon using the yellow plug. We're going to want to find the exact spot where the yellow socket is, and in the equivalent space in this blueprint, place the yellow plug so that when the dungeon is generated, the plug and the socket occupy the same space. Then we're going to save. And once again, we're going to add the boss area blueprint, the boss area entry to the .dungeon file so we can test the .dungeon file, make sure everything is working correctly. And then save. And then we can once again drag the .blueprint file into the Metaforge and do a walkthrough to make sure that everything is working correctly. And once again, we're going to go through with the player point of view, just in case there's anything else for us to see that we're going to need to fix. So the connection between the entrance area to the adventure area is working correctly. And we can see that this is a bit of a maze, and that's having the desired effect. Luckily, we know where the next, which way to go to proceed to the next area. And here is where the adventure area connects to the boss area. Get a glimpse of what the player is going to experience when they come in, and then see the decoration on the walls and all that. The difference between a barn and a dungeon are traps and enemies. As you may have noticed from our player walkthroughs, the dungeon itself isn't very exciting yet because there's nothing to do there. It's just a collection of rooms. So now is where we add the traps and enemies to the dungeon. Okay, so this particular adventure area has a number of different routes to reach the access to the boss room. There's a long way and a short way. Obviously, everyone's going to just choose to use the short way. So in order to make that not quite as straightforward, we're going to pepper the short route with a bunch of traps. We're going to start off by putting a row of traps over here, which immediately tells the player that this is the harder route. They can either choose to jump over traps, or they can choose the long route, which has no traps, and it's just a long corridor. So here since jump traps are kind of easy, we're gonna add some line turrets to force the player to time their jumps. And then we don't want the player going into this dead end, so we're just going to make it the worst possible thing that we can. We're just gonna make it a massive death to tell the player, yeah, you really don't want to go this way. And then just to make the player's life harder, we're going to put a couple of launch pads here that we're going to just launch the player into the maw of hell. And then to make that even more interesting, we're just gonna lace this entire place with spike traps. So spikes, 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 more spikes. Everybody loves spikes. When creating rows of spikes like this, always build from the top down, because if not, you'll see the spikes will automatically try to place as vertical instead of horizontal. Okay, so now we have the dead end of doom all done and complete, and so it's time to go and give some attention to the long route. The long route, we instead of making it, since we already have a really trap heavy environment in the dead end of doom, we're gonna make the long route more of a fighting challenge. So this is the NPC spawner, and we're going to place a bunch of these along the long route, and it's just going to be a series of one-on-one fights for the player. Now the limit for NPCs spawned by a lair is 5, but that doesn't mean you can only place 5 spawn locations. If you place more spawn locations for NPCs, what the game will do is select 5 out of however many you place and populate those with NPCs to a maximum of 5. Once that is done, then we can save the R file, and we have to add our variant to the .dungeon file. So to do this, we can take the data from any of the other iterations of that same area, in this case the adventure area, and copy paste it and edit the blueprint to match the new name, revise the numbers on the piece listings so that we don't have any gaps in our number progression or any repeats, since that will throw off the dungeon generator. And once we've done that, we will also want to change the weight variable. The last part is to edit the name of the blueprint to match our new variant, in this case level_3b, and save our work, and then run the .dungeon file in the Metaforge to make sure that the dungeon generates with that particular piece correctly, and we can traverse that section of the dungeon without any issue. So here we are going down the stairs into the adventure area, and here's our death trap of doom. So just to see that it works, if we don't calculate our jump very carefully, we'll get thrown into the dead end of doom and take a lot of damage, and then have to fight our way back out of it. And here's a comparatively simple jumping puzzle leading down to the stairs to the boss area. Verify that the portal will teleport you out correctly, and that's pretty much it. This tutorial is basically just scratching the surface of how deep you can go into building dungeons and lairs for Trove. And really, your imagination is the only limit. And hey, if your dungeon gets accepted, we have a lot of really sweet rewards for you. We really look forward to you trying your hand at it and submitting your creations to us, and we really look forward to seeing you in game.